Imagine waking up to find your country's biggest bank frozen. Not by hackers, not because it failed, but because a foreign power 8,000 miles away said so. This isn't a thriller. This is the real warning sent out by the US Treasury to the global financial system. If you process China's oil trades tied to Iran, even if it's settled in Chinese yuan, you could be locked out of the entire US banking network. Here's the twist. The more Washington tries to tighten its grip, the faster the world races to build systems that leave the US behind. And that shift? It's already begun. In April 2025, top US Treasury officials held a secret meeting in Hong Kong, not to negotiate, but to deliver what experts are calling one of the most forceful financial ultimatums in recent memory. As reported by Bloomberg and CNBC, Washington warned global banks, if you handle Iranian oil, especially if it ends up in China, you could be completely shut off from the US financial system. That includes SWIFT, dollar clearing, and any dealings with US-based financial intermediaries. This wasn't just a threat. Within 2 weeks, 9 Hong Kong-based companies were hit with sanctions for allegedly laundering Iranian oil money using fake shipping documents linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. But here's where things shift. China, playing it smart, currently buys over 1 million barrels of Iranian oil every day. That's 91% of Iran's total exports, and most of these payments happen in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. The US isn't just going after oil. It's trying to dismantle a growing trade system that operates outside of the dollar. But the more Washington uses its financial muscle as a weapon, the more it pushes the world toward a different path, one without the dollar at the center. Hong Kong's banks now find themselves stuck between two global giants. According to the Wall Street Journal, US officials have pressured major institutions, like HSBC and Bank of China Hong Kong, to look past shell companies and uncover the true beneficiaries behind Iranian oil deals, especially those settled in yuan or other non-dollar currencies. These aren't small-time players. As of the first quarter of 2025, Hong Kong managed over $260 billion in cross-border transactions, with more than 54% now in yuan. For the first time, the yuan has overtaken the US dollar in Hong Kong, according to China's foreign exchange regulator. What makes this truly unprecedented is the reach of Washington's demands. The US is effectively instructing non-US banks operating entirely outside of American borders to enforce US policy. Analysts like Max Maish from the FDD warn that unless these banks are officially appointed for enforcement, this blurs the line between lawful regulation and outright coercion. But what if these banks refuse, or worse, choose to side with Beijing's financial alternatives? Iranian oil isn't just about supply, it's about long-term strategic value. Under a 2021 cooperation pact between China and Iran, Beijing secured oil discounts of 12% below market rate, plus a risk buffer of 6 to 8%. These deals are locked in, long-term, and denominated entirely in yuan. It's more than just energy. It's a direct shot at dollar dominance. Scott Mell, CEO of Rapidan Energy Group, says Trump's latest sanctions are aimed directly at China's state-run firms and infrastructure. But here's the irony. Each new sanction only gives Beijing more reason to strengthen its alternative systems. By March 2025, China's cross-border yuan transactions surged to $725 billion, a 22% jump year over year. According to Bloomberg, the yuan now accounts for 4.13% of global payments, a record high. This isn't just a workaround, it's a blueprint. And as the US squeezes harder, it could be fast-tracking what it fears most, a post-dollar oil economy. Now imagine you're a foreign company thinking about expanding into the US. The market looks attractive on paper, huge consumer base, major economy, but then you check the data. As of April 2025, US consumer confidence has fallen to its second lowest point in history. The University of Michigan's latest survey shows 12-month inflation expectations at 5.6%, a level unseen since 1981. In that same month, retail and wholesale profit margins dropped 1.6%, the worst decline in over 10 years, according to the US Census Bureau. Retailers aren't raising prices, they're eating the costs, and that's even before adding tariffs into the mix. The Commerce Department shows steel import prices have surged 25% year over year. Bloomberg reports that since 2023, retail profits have declined in 15 out of the past 17 months. This isn't a boom cycle, it's an economy, under pressure. So if America's reshoring plan depends on strong consumer demand, what happens when that very foundation begins to crack? President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill promised to make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. But hidden within that bill is a clause that could have massive implications for the global economy. If approved, the bill would allow the U.S. to impose retaliatory taxes on any foreign nation that treats American companies unfairly. But what counts as fair isn't clearly defined in law, and all enforcement power rests with the White House. The proposed penalties include a 5 percentage point rise in taxes on income foreign companies earn in the U.S. and a withholding tax hike from 10% to 12.5% on outgoing payments. These figures were confirmed by the Congressional Budget Office. A May 2025 report from the Tax Foundation warns that such increases could slash foreign direct investment in the U.S. by as much as $91 billion per year. Even more ironic, this measure might actually harm the very reshoring push it aims to help. Higher taxes, unpredictable policy changes, and the threat of trade retaliation create exactly the kind of instability that drives manufacturers away. Besson told Congress the bill would help stabilize the deficit to GDP ratio. But early projections from the Joint Committee on Taxation show growing deficits in several income brackets. So instead of drawing investment in, the U.S. could end up pushing it out. Secondary sanctions are supposed to be a sharp tool, accurate, targeted. But in reality, they often act more like explosives. According to the U.S. Treasury, any foreign banks that help with sanctioned trades, like Chinese oil payments to Iran routed through Yuan, risk being cut off from dollar clearing. Ironically, this warning is fueling the very behavior Washington is trying to prevent. China's central bank reports that cross-border transactions in yuan hit $724.9 billion in March 2025. That's 54.3% of China's total global trade, up from just 36% in 2022. SWIFT data now shows the yuan is the world's fourth most used currency, holding a record 4.13% share in global payments. China's approach isn't just about business, it's part of a bigger strategy. In April, the People's Bank of China introduced incentives for state-run companies to settle foreign deals entirely in yuan. As reported by Reuters, PBOC Deputy Governor Liu Lei criticized the breakdown of multilateral trade and said rising tariffs are disrupting the global economy. Here's the twist. The more the U.S. sanctions countries like Iran and China, the more those nations find ways to reduce their reliance on the dollar, giving others a roadmap to do the same. But if the dollar loses its default global role, what takes its place? Now picture this. You're the CFO of a major Japanese car maker. Business is good until you convert your U.S. earnings back to yen. In 2025, the dollar has dropped 8.1% against the yen, wiping out your profits from American factories. And that's just part of the pressure. The U.S. is also pushing a 5-point corporate tax hike on foreign firms, along with higher withholding taxes on outbound payments. According to the Tax Foundation, this could drive away $91 billion in foreign investment every year. The labor market isn't balancing the risks either. April stats from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show no growth in manufacturing jobs, and real wages fell 0.3% quarter over quarter. Add to that wild regulatory swings, tariffs jumping from 10% to 30%, then paused, then brought back. For foreign companies, this is a moving target. Even long-established businesses are pulling back. Bloomberg reports that 246 major U.S. companies have gone bankrupt so far this year, the most in 15 years. The harder Washington tries to steer global capital, the faster that capital looks elsewhere. Trump's trade policy counts on pressure, but without steady rules, pressure just leads to chaos. Since January 2025, tariffs on Chinese goods have swung wildly between 10% and 30%. Analysts in a Bloomberg poll of 22 global fund managers expect them to stay in place at least through late 2025. Chinese exports to the U.S. have dropped significantly, and official data for April shows that China's industrial output only grew by 5.9%, down from 7.7% in March. But what's even more damaging than the size of these economic changes is how unpredictable they've become. Sam Jacob, an economist at EFG Asset Management, says Trump's first term should serve as a cautionary tale. Deals don't always stick. Companies today aren't just calculating prices and tariffs. They're also factoring in chaos. Retailers scrambled to stock up before tariffs kicked in, pushing costs higher. Meanwhile, manufacturers paused investment plans, unsure what the rules would be in 6 months. Even the May tariff truce announcement was met with doubt. The bigger issue isn't just the fight, it's the confusion. And no one's ready to pour billions into uncertainty. Sanctioning oil is one matter. Sanctioning entire financial systems is something else entirely. In May, the United States officially blacklisted 9 Hong Kong-based non-bank entities for allegedly hiding the origins of Iranian oil, according to the Treasury. But the pressure didn't stop there. United States officials also met with big banks in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, demanding they investigate non-dollar transactions linked to Iranian oil, often moved through shell companies tied to Chinese buyers. Max Masish, from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, says the strongest move would be to actually sanction the responsible banks. But he also warns that such a step could spark a massive backlash. Many Hong Kong banks have branches in Europe and the United States. They risk being cut off from the dollar-based global banking system. At the same time, China is quietly building financial alternatives. In April, it expanded its central bank digital currency pilot programs for trade with Southeast Asia, avoiding dollar-based channels entirely. By using dollar access as a weapon, the United States might actually be encouraging the rest of the world to move on without it. And that shift, it's already happening. America's dominance in global finance was never just about the dollar, it was about trust. So what happens when allies, business partners, and major banks stop believing that dollar access will remain stable, fair, or even legal? The more the United States uses its financial power as leverage, the more the world starts to question whether it's worth the risk. China isn't pushing back with weapons, it's pushing back with numbers, through spreadsheets, oil deals, and new payment systems. And honestly, it's finding countries ready to join in. But here's the real cliffhanger. If today's global banking system breaks under pressure from sanctions, tariffs, and chaos, what comes next? Who will set the rules in the future? And will the next reserve currency be built on strong economics or on political power? Let us know what you think in the comments. Has the United States pushed this strategy too far? Or is it the only real way to hold on to leverage in an unpredictable world? If you're enjoying this video, give it a like and subscribe. And don't miss the next one, it's already up now.